All right, thank you for the introduction. So hello everyone, I'm Lukas. I'm from HOPR, which is a privacy incentivized mixnet, and it's partly one of the reasons why we do care about post-quantum cryptography, because HOPR is like essentially a new version of Tor with incentivization. So we have a large off-chain part next to the on-chain part, which could also be made post-quantum already. So that's why we're actually turning towards this direction already as well. So I guess everybody has already seen pictures like these. So the question is, what will actually happen when these expensive-looking chandeliers kind of start to make something really useful? And that's where actually most of the cryptography we see in the blockchain world, like elliptic curves, hash functions, or zero-knowledge proofs, might become endangered. And in a sense that the quantum computers, whether they're real or not already, they might endanger elliptic curves because the ECDLP can be essentially effectively broken by a quantum computer of certain size. Zero-knowledge proved based also on DLPs or bilinear ECDLP could be broken as well with those. So the question is, what happens next, right? So there are what actually becomes broken, right, when there is a quantum computer. So we have obviously the problem with the most used curve, probably SecP2 to SecK1 becomes broken. Private keys can be recovered from any transaction. And a funny consequence is that basically anyone with a quantum computer could eventually claim they're Satoshi, right? In fact, all of the ECC, not just this curve, all of the ECC is broken as well. Signatures can be forged, and long-term secrets can be therefore recovered. And as I said, the pairing-based cryptography, which is based also on ECDLP, elliptic curve discrete lock, will be endangered as well. But you might say, okay, quantum computers are not real, right? Or maybe they're not yet real, right? So the migration, nevertheless, in the off-chain world is already happening. So, for example, there's this very often cited, go back. Oh, okay, sorry. Very often cited study by Cloudflare where they actually looked into how many people or how much traffic that goes through Cloudflare is already utilizing post-quantum, and there is like almost like a triple increase in 2025 compared to the year 2024. That's just traffic that goes through Cloudflare and traffic which originates from humans, so it's not machine-generated traffic. And other notable protocols actually already employ post-quantum, like there is a post-quantum WireGuard proposal. SSH already employs post-quantum cipher suites, so it's not just TLS. And also various encrypted services utilize, email encrypted services already utilize post-quantum cryptography. And the idea behind that is because if these are not just data in transit, but data at rest, and these are especially vulnerable to something called harvest now, decrypt later, right? So basically, if there's an adversary which hopes that there will be a quantum computer in the future, it could gather data now and decrypt them later. So that's why this migration is already taking place, and there has been multiple standards already standardized by NIST for post-quantum cryptography. And the recommendation is to be fully post-quantum latest by 2035, so in 10 years from now. So what are the alternatives, right, we have right now? So as I said, there is NIST has selected some standardized post-quantum algorithms. So there's algorithms for signing and also something called key encapsulation, which for some of you who come from the background knowing about RSA encryption or encryption using elliptic curves like ElGamal or ECs, the key encapsulation is basically a rebrand of that, right? So it's asymmetric encryption, meaning key encapsulation. And besides these, if you say, okay, I don't kind of would like to trust what NIST proposes or it doesn't fit my purpose, there are also some good, great quality finalists which have certain pros and cons compared to them. And there's also an ongoing round 2 for additional post-quantum signature schemes, right? So if we then look at some other stuff in blockchain that would be most notably zero-knowledge proof systems, there are some good examples which are thought to be post-quantum safe. Most notable examples would be ZK Stark or Plonk, where you replace KZG with something called fast Solomon Reed IOPP, where you get something called Plonk Stark, which is already thought to be post-quantum secure. And some other example would be like something called PQ Snark. Basically, some classical algorithms are also not susceptible to quantum computers. So if you're using like hash functions which are long enough, or symmetric encryption, where the keys are long enough, there you're kind of fine. There are some examples of algorithms which have also information security, meaning that they're basically unbreakable by anything or even some weird alien technology that comes from the distant future. And the example most widely used is the Shamir secret sharing scheme. However, it's in its raw form, right? So when you use something like a verifiable Shamir secret sharing scheme, that verification part is no longer post-quantum secure, right? But in its raw form, the secret sharing scheme is. OTPs, one-time pass, obviously not very practical, so most likely people won't start using it because they want to be safe from post-quantum. So what it looks like for the signatures, right? So if we look at this table, for the green lines, you see that there are the pre-quantum technology, that means elliptic curves and integer factoring. You see that there are public key sizes and signature sizes you're already familiar with. And there is a comparison of how fast they are compared to the new post-quantum standard, and what's the size of signatures. So you see a drastic increase of public key size, signature size, which obviously brings an engineering challenge, depending on your use case. And signing used to be in pre-quantum world also quite faster. I picked some other interesting algorithms, basically best in their own category. So depending on what you're optimizing for, you might opt in for something different than what NIST actually tells you to be a standard, because these are also good quality, possibly not yet broken candidates. Because, as I said, this was just a selection. There's many more. There's a whole zoo of post-quantum signatures. You see the dark dots, which are signature algorithms. The stars are the standard algorithms or the standardized one. And you see the signature size on the left side and public key on the right side. So for example, if your project wants to have super small signatures because you're transmitting data a lot, and you want a trade-off in a public key size, you have a higher public key size, you might be looking somewhere in this area, right? So the pre-quantum algorithms, this is ECC actually. So very small keys, very small public key size. You see not many of them are actually getting close in this space. So the practical problems, as I mentioned, sign and verification speed is improving for sure. Signature sizes poses a bigger problem because obviously, for example, if you decided, okay, I want to use only post-quantum signing in Ethereum, and then you would like to, for example, aggregate these signatures as it already happens in Ethereum in proof of stake, then you have to transmit quite a lot of data, right? So there are solutions which actually trying to tackle this aggregation. So for aggregation, naturally, you wouldn't choose the hash-based like SHL DSA, but you would use likely something with algebraic structure. There's also some interesting recent development in aggregation via snarks. So you basically do not aggregate the signature itself, but you aggregate a proof of that. given that if the proof actually itself could be post-quantum safe, then you might be good as well. Let's take a look at the other type of algorithms, which is the key encapsulation algorithms. This is a table, a similar one. So we have the pre-quantum stuff. And here I picked just two NIST finalists. So there's a situation is slightly different from the engineering perspective. You, again, deal with an increased public key size and private key size as well. But these algorithms tend to be much, much better than the pre-quantum algorithms for encryption, right? So in terms of speed, these are awesome. In terms of expansion of the public key size and ciphertext size, they might pose some problems. Again, when you transmit a lot of data, encryption, and then you end up with a lot of packets being actually transmitted, that might hit performance quite badly. So again, the practical problem here is that CAMs directly replace the ephemeral Diffie-Hellman key agreement. That's not a practical problem. That's basically way how they're used to be, way they're used. What the problem is here that there's a notable ciphertext expansion, as I mentioned, and the public key. So exactly. So if you're exchanging the ephemeral keys, very often you have to deal with an increased amount of data being transferred. In addition, if you build more complex protocols out of, or used to build more complex protocols out of elliptic curves, for example, you probably use the additive or multiplicative group structure. So this is not there, obviously. It could be partially mitigated from the engineering point of view by using something called CAM combiners, which is an original scheme, a scheme developed for creating hybrid schemes. I'll be talking about that in the next slide. And in this way, you could mitigate for missing algebraic structure. So you could basically put in different public keys together and then basically derive one shared secret in a similar way, like you would used to do in two out of two secret sharing scheme, for example, using Diffie-Hellman. There's another interesting thing, actually, and it's called multi-message, multi-recipient CAM, which is particularly useful for schemes where you have like multi-party key agreements. And when you compare this to a naive approach where you'll be sending like basically public key, post-quantum public key to all the parties, like this, compared to this one, 80% of the size would be reduced. So you could spare really precious bandwidth when doing these kind of multi-party key exchanges. But again, there are some missing properties or non-existing properties in the post-quantum world, which we were used to use when building a protocol. Okay, so what is the prognosis, right? Exactly. So I was thinking, okay, should I use quantum, post-quantum algorithms? Should I use pre-quantum algorithms, or what should I do? So maybe the answer is hidden between, like, you know, if you look back at the competition that NIST made, and you look at all the algorithms which were submitted as submissions to this competition, and you immediately see how many of them actually became broken, and some of them broken so badly that people thought, okay, is like this post-quantum security even a thing? Is it even possible? The most notable example is Psych, which was thought to be like the one which had the smallest key sizes, right? But it was broken basically over a weekend, and nobody expected that. It was almost like in one of the latest finalists. Lots of these algorithms were actually weakened. Right, so these algorithms have much less security than it was thought they would have. That means things still change. Even after the standards were being standardized, things could still get broken. And that's why the industry actually tries to counter that. And by broken, I mean broken with the classical computer, right? So it's a thing thought to be post-quantum secure, but it's broken by a classical computer, a non-quantum attack. So that's why, as I mentioned, TLS, SSH, these commonly used protocols are deploying something called hybrid schemes, which basically means, for example, for signing, you submit two signatures, one with a post-quantum algorithm, the other one with a pre-quantum algorithm, and that thing is actually valid if both of the signatures are valid at the same time. The same thing would apply for CHEM. So you use secrets from both classically derived key encapsulation algorithm like X25519, and use it together with the material you decrypt from the CHEM, which is post-quantum secure. So, but obviously, this has another worsening effect towards bandwidth. Now you don't have to transmit just the large keys, post-quantum keys or post-quantum ciphertext or post-quantum signatures, but you also have to transmit the classical ones, right? So, but it has the added benefit that you're not betting just on a single card, right? So at this point, you're saying, okay, if a post-quantum algorithm gets broken, then I still have this classical one, which is a time-tested one, in the mix, right? So that's where the CHEM combiners actually came into place, and in this key exchange, for example, they're used to combine a classical and post-quantum CHEM to make things secure in a hybrid way. The question is, do we have hybrid solutions for zero-knowledge proofs? I haven't seen many, actually, but the thing is, like, we shouldn't bet on things not to become broken because we think it's post-quantum secure. The question is whether we should actually have a similar hybrid approach also for zero-knowledge proofs. So, yeah, that's about it. That's, here are some references I'd use. And, yeah, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Does it work? No? Does it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk. It was really inspiring for me. I have two questions. One of them is how quantum computers are going to affect the consensus. I mean, find the hashes and find the blocks. Create the blocks. Yeah. Second, about the final slide, you said about this hybrid solution. Mm-hmm. So did you mean that we should use classical and post-quantum signatures together?
Well, so okay. So
in that case, you know, if we already rely on classical, I mean, then it shouldn't be a little bit weaker than the current one.
Okay, so to your first question first, so in consensus, you're basically transmitting signatures, right, which are getting aggregated by...
basically finding the, random to create the hash.
You would assume that you're able to basically break the keys which you make signatures with, right? So you would be able to recover public keys, private keys from the public keys, and then basically in a consensus, you could like transmit attestations which are not signed by the actual validator, right? So that might kind of, there are not yet attacks being developed which would assume quantum computers, but the assumption is when these nefarious things are possible, and these are kind of not the assumption of the security model or threat model, then nobody knows what is going to happen, but probably nasty thing is going to happen. And to your second question regarding the hybrid schemes, yeah, well, basically, if you look at TLS, if you look at SSH, if you even look at a post-quantum WireGuard, they use these hybrid schemes just to be sure, because the post-quantum algorithms, being based on problems which are fairly old and tested, they are still fairly new. That's one thing. And second thing, which is also kind of considered not very in favor of trust, is that fact that they have fairly complicated algebraic structure. So, for example, like it's for the researchers and cryptographers, it's fairly easier to believe in something which is a fairly simple algebraic structure, and it's therefore easy to understand and prove something about it. If you look, for example, at lattice schemes, which are module lattice algorithms, they're fairly complex, have fairly complex algebraic structure, and nobody really knows until time tells if this could lead to some additional attacks. So that's the reason why people to be like more conservative, the people who want to be more conservative to employ these hybrid schemes to actually be sure that, okay, we have this time-tested ECC algorithm which has been there for like the past 20 years and nobody has broken it so far. And assuming there's not a quantum computer coming soon, I could combine that with a post-quantum stuff to have like, not to bet on a single card, pretty much. Right? So the question is whether should this also happen for zero-knowledge proof systems, right?
Okay, thank you. So you are saying that if there is an attack to post-quantum, and we are still asking for the classical, so we are pretty much...
Exactly.
Yeah.
We bet on two cards, right?
Good,
so,
thanks.
Yeah.
For the consensus, what I meant actually, for example, we know that the first blocks in Bitcoin were already mined by Satoshi. Maybe, I don't remember the exact number, but maybe 500,000 or even could be 1 million Bitcoin is still there. So if Satoshi is, by the way, public keys are not known because it's already hashed there.
Yeah.
But as long as it's going to move, then it's going to. So I believe either, I mean, he has to, or they have to remove their...
If there was a public key for Satoshi somewhere out there...
No, there is no,
if there's
it's all hashes.
Yeah. Then it would be, then somebody could take the public key, use a quantum computer, break it, right? So that was just a funny consequence that might be if there was a public key, but it could happen to any transactions being made, because from a transaction, obviously, you can recover the public key that signed the transaction, then you can break it if you have a quantum computer. Luckily, we still seem to the latest research made by Google, we're like still about 3 orders of magnitude in terms of how many qubits are needed to actually break an RSA, for example, right? But it's thought that the ECDLP algorithms, so elliptic curves, are going to be broken sooner because obviously the amount of qubits you need to break that is lower, right?
Hello. So you answered my first question about how many qubits will be enough for attacking the RSA systems or any kind of blockchain activities. But for my instance, my university recently had 5 qubit quantum computer in itself, and I don't think that will be enough for attacking the blockchain systems or RSAs, but will it be enough for using the perfect algorithm for quantum computers? Like it will be enough for attacking the blockchain system with only 5 qubits if you use a perfect world scenario? Or is it really required to have so much qubits inside just to attack?
Yeah, I would. It's not in the references, but I would direct you to a nice study made by Google, which studies exactly this, right? So it's quite recent. I think it was in the past couple of days it went out. And they basically say, okay, so if you want to break something like RSA 2048, which is in security equivalent to the elliptic curves used by Ethereum, you need something which has at least 1 million qubits, which are not error corrected. So there's still a distinction. You're talking about qubits, but there's a distinction. You have to talk about whether the qubit is error corrected or a general qubit which can have errors. So, and obviously, it's harder to get those qubits which are error corrected, right? But they're assuming that to breaking the RSA, you would have to have like 1 million of error corrected qubits, whereas the best quantum computers now have around 100 to 1,000. So as I said, about 3 orders of magnitude somewhere else. Yeah. So does it answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Kind of think that the 5 qubits are really perfectly aligned and there is no errors. So could we assume that even with the 5 qubits or 10 qubits, right? I'm not talking about right now, but maybe in the future with perfect algorithms, can they be resolving the problem that we talked?
I think with 5 qubits, you cannot break things like EC. I mean, it depends on the definition of your qubit, right? But yes. I mean, if we mean the same ones, I don't think that it's possible to break the current crypto with that few qubits. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much for all the answers, for the talk. So round of applause for Lukas.